I'm very happy to be with you. I'm told that this is sort of your last day, and therefore you're in a very good mood. So on that basis, having been told that, I thought, well, let's just do something very chatty. You have to appreciate that you are learning things that didn't exist when I was a student. There were lots of disciplines that had never gelled as kind of academic discipline. So I am hugely interested in what you know about leadership, because myself, I don't know it in any formal way. I have no kind of parameters to be able to tell you much about leadership. And I'm, as I said, hugely interested in what you can tell me. I still have a few miles to go, so I may as well try to figure it out on the last miles. But I'm going to tell you, well, the other thing I should say at the outset is I started my career as an academic, as a law teacher. And for those of us who were real academics in the classroom, you know, sort of professional, tenured professors, we were very contemptuous, even though we invited them all the time, of practitioners and other forms of celebrities that we invited to come to talk to our classes and tell war stories that were meant to be slightly amusing and at times purported to convey some kind of message, but it wasn't too clear what the message was, except they tended to be very self-complimentary. So, but now I find myself in exactly that position, which is hugely uncomfortable. So I will not tell anything that's very complimentary, self-complimentary, except that I heard somebody yesterday say something that I found very distressing. It's apparently a true story. They're always apparently true stories. Apparently, Golda Meir said to Moshe Dayan one day, "Listen, Moshe, you shouldn't be so humble, you know, you're not that great." So now, I don't know. I don't want to be too humble because I'm not that great, but I don't know what to do. So, quite honestly, I'm not too sure where to begin to try to launch a conversation with you. Maybe what I'll do is just see whether you want to take me anywhere. If anybody can launch a conversation. Otherwise, I could ramble, but it's not going to be particularly, yes, somebody's saving my life.
I'm a historian, and I work in the area of women's history, and I've taught women's biography in particular. And I shot my hand up really quickly because I wanted to get this question in first, because I would like to know about your girlhood. The model I'm interested in is how history and biography intersect, and the moment in a woman's life that becomes very formative. And I wondered, could you tell us something about your girlhood and your influences, and how as a young teenager you selected law, what kind of women role models you had, or male role models you had, and what were the early formative experiences that maybe told you that you had some chutzpah or something that you could move on with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Unfortunately, I'm afraid this is all going to be very disappointing. So I'm going to start with, in order to answer your question, you can't just look at me. You need a critical mass, obviously, of a lot of stories. Because I think in many, many respects, I have to start that way. I think mine is not very typical, and because of that, I have to say, you shouldn't take much out of it. I don't think it's very revealing, because my entire career has been, first, very much at odds with all my formative years, first thing. Secondly, has been extremely unplanned, very chaotic, very ad hoc, very whimsical, which is, in the profession I was in, is not standard. And I never had any role models, not men, not women, nobody, because I don't, I think I don't believe as much in personal leadership as I do in more collaborative, institutional, collective movements, which is, I think, what's happening now in North Africa and in the Middle East. It's a repudiation of the charismatic personal model in favor of, in a sense, leaderless movement. That's my style. So in that sense, my story is not very significant, at least from my point of view. And I could not put myself forward as a role model, certainly not to, say, law students, people in my profession, because you don't quit the Supreme Court of Canada, so, which I did. So, and I'm prepared to concede that you don't do that unless you have a really good reason, which I think I did. But so I grew up in Montreal in what was then, well, when I first went, was a girls' Catholic school convent, which eventually became a classical college. So there are lots of ironies. Again, I'm into these war stories, exactly what I hate, but listen, you brought me here. So I was in a single gender, extremely homogeneous environment. Everybody was Catholic, everybody was French Canadian. We didn't know anybody else, and we didn't care all that much about anybody else. I wore a uniform until I went to law school when I was 20 years old. I went to this college in grade 6, and I did all my classical college there. I was a boarder for many of these years. When I graduated, I swore to God I would never wear a uniform ever again, which is why I ruled out joining the Army. But there were a few other reasons, but that was one of them. And then, of course, I became a judge, and I wore a uniform for another 15 years. But that's another footnote to these stories. So I grew up in exactly that, a very homogeneous environment. And I essentially spent the rest of my life running away from that, craving, in a sense, what was not there, which is a very multicultural, multi-ethnic, diverse, pluralistic world. And of course, another thing that with hindsight, if I look back over my shoulder and I see the pattern, I'm sort of addicted. I thrive when I basically don't know what I'm doing. And as soon as I've got it more or less figured out, it's not that I lose interest, it's that it's not as much fun as when I don't know. So as soon as I graduated from law school, speaking virtually no English, I moved to English Canada, where I was not a member of the bar. I was a member of the Quebec bar, not a member of the bar. I had a civil law degree, which did not qualify me to practice, which in any event I couldn't have done because of language problem. I found myself teaching, which I had never planned to do, a little bit by default. Then I became a judge, having never been in a courtroom in my life, which is, again, very unusual. Academics sometimes get appointed to the bench, but usually to the appeal level, so you don't have to really run a trial. So I went. It's very scary. It's very scary for anybody the first day you're a judge and you walk into court. But if on top of it is the first time you've walked into a courtroom, it's even scarier. You have to figure out where to sit, which you get a general gist of it having watched a little TV, but it's a lot of stuff you don't know. And I realized I like that, this kind of scary feeling. And then from that, I eventually went to work internationally. I had never set foot in the headquarters of the United Nations in New York. Most people who go there have a background in international affairs, and so the first international work I did, I had no background for, no preparation. And it was, each time, what I found was not at all what I had expected. And I've done that time and again. Then I went to the Supreme Court of Canada, then I quit, then I went back to work internationally. So it's a very, very disconnected story. It doesn't have a line that runs through it. It's just happened. Ah, this is picking up. Yes.
Hi, my name is Isai. My question is your experience in ICC, the International Criminal Court. As a person that requests to indict a president or an individual, which you did in 2 occasions. And the international court system, as I understand it, that there are countries that sign to be members, there are countries that are not. And in taking that, the United States is not one of the countries that signed to be the member. In asking for an indictment or for charges to be laid against a person. What we see now is mostly African leaders or third world, maybe a little developed countries, head of states are being charged. Never the other side.
That's right.
Does that create a leadership ethical issue to you?
Yes.
In asking?
Yes. Well, first of all, I was never the prosecutor of the ICC. I was involved in the earlier models, the International Criminal Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and the Tribunal for Rwanda. Now, you're right, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has been created by treaty, and so member states sign on to be subjected to its jurisdiction. The tribunals I was involved in were created by the Security Council of the United Nations, and the several countries involved, all the countries of the former Yugoslavia, Serbia, and Montenegro, Bosnia, Croatia, had not signed on to anything. It was imposed on them, and the same for Rwanda. So the model was different. But I'll take your question to mean, should it create an ethical problem for the prosecutor of the ICC now, that in fact the two most prominent cases that the ICC has are in countries that didn't sign the Rome Treaty creating the courts. These cases were referred to the court by the Security Council, Sudan, and now just yesterday, Libya. And most of the prosecutors' work so far is in countries that have actually signed on to the ICC, but they're all Africans. There's a case from Uganda against the LRA, there's a case from Kenya, there's a case from the DRC, but these, in a sense, these countries had accepted the jurisdiction of the court. Does it create, I wouldn't say it's an ethical dilemma, it's a political dilemma, I think, to be running an institution that does not enjoy the kind of legitimacy and credibility, for instance, that Canadian courts enjoy. Many years ago, I spoke when my son was in grade 4 or something. There was you'll think I'm a long way from your answer, but you'll see I'll get back to the point. There was a kind of parents' day, like professional day, and the principal at the school asked us to come. Like I was a judge and somebody else was, I don't know, somebody did something on television, someone was a technician, and so there were 4 or 5 of us, and we met students, these grade 4 students, and they asked questions.